Welcome to, I think this is the 5th or 6th Psychedelic Safety Seminar, which happen more or less every month, organized by the Challenging Psychedelic Experiences Project. We also have a newsletter, Ecstatic Integration, and we write about harm and harm reduction in psychedelics, including harm from abusive organizations, communities, retreat centers, training courses, and so on. This event is on psychedelics and cultic social dynamics. We're going to look at what are cultic social dynamics, when are they healthy, when are they unhealthy, how do psychedelics amplify them, and how can we protect ourselves from unhealthy cultic dynamics. Our main speaker today is Dr. Steve Hassan, who's an expert, perhaps the leading expert on cults, the creator.
Can I correct you and say Hassan?
Okay, sure. Sorry, Steve. The creator of the BITE model, the author of numerous books, and a consultant on many cult cases. Steve was himself in a cult as a student in the Moonies. So he's had firsthand experience of the manipulation tactics of destructive high control groups. The structure is that Steve's going to talk for 25 minutes. Then we have a guest, Yeva, who will talk for 10 minutes about her experience in a shamanic cult. Then I will talk for 10 minutes about the research that Joseph Adams and I are doing in this area. And that will leave 45 minutes for questions and answers and your comments from the audience, because I know that many of, if not most of you, might have had experience of somewhat culty psychedelic communities and organizations that are somewhere on the continuum from healthy to unhealthy. By the way, we originally hoped that Dr. Nishay Devano could join us. Sadly, she's unwell, but just like to acknowledge her work on this topic as well. So while Steve is talking, you can write comments and questions in the chat, and please everyone put yourself on mute. Okay, over to you, Steve.
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me. And it was actually Nishay.
My wire's not working to charge the thing, so.
Now can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Hi, so I'm Steve Hassan. I live in the Boston area. And I heard Nishay interviewed on my friend Dave Troy's podcast about test crealism and psychedelics. And I was fascinated, and I wound up interviewing her for my influence continuum. And basically then I went and heard her speak at a 2-day Harvard psychedelic assisted therapy workshop. And then I been getting more and more invitations to share my expertise. So thank you, Jules and Pearl. I'm going to share my screen. Boy, Zoom just changed their setup, so I'm not used to it. So I have 2 websites. freedomofmind.com is the main a website. I have blogs. I have free downloadable things, and just a ton of resources. freedomfromundueinfluence.org is the nonprofit where I do research, and so I'll dive into it. I always like to start presentations with the question, how would you know if you were under mind control? And it's not so easy. And I can tell you that I was recruited into a front group of the Moonies cult in 1974 when I was 19. I had no interest in dropping out of college, quitting my job, donating my bank account, and following a fat Korean billionaire who claimed to be 10 times greater than Jesus or Buddha or anybody else. But I, in fact, became a right-wing fascist. And this is a mass wedding where people didn't know each other, and he assigned people to marry each other. And I won't spend a lot of time on the Moonies, but to say he died in 2012. His wife took over the main cult, but 2 of the sons are in Pennsylvania, and one of them has a gun cult Rod of Iron Ministries. He wears a crown of AR-15 golden bullets. His brother has a gun factory, and they have 2 training compounds. And they paid Donald Trump $2.5 million to endorse the Moonies a few weeks after January 6th. The Moonies were at January 6th. Their newspaper was saying it's Antifa, Antifa. And of course, that was propaganda. All right, so that's my background. That's how I got interested in this stuff. And I was totally indoctrinated and was a leader in the group. And very briefly, I got out after a near-fatal van crash due to sleep deprivation. And after 2 weeks in the hospital, visited my sister, led to a deprogramming, which started involuntarily, then became voluntary. Why? Because I wanted to prove to my family I wasn't in a cult and I wasn't brainwashed, which is the first slide of how would you know? Because I was convinced I wasn't. But this is from the DSM-5, from the American Psychiatric Association. And I'll add that there are a lot of cult propagandists that masquerade as sociologists of religion that say there's no evidence of brainwashing, all religions are fine, and we can't call anything cults. But in terms of my work as a mental health professional, what my experiences of 47 years is it's a dissociative disorder. And different words, brainwashing, thought reform, mind control. And the issue is really about change of identity. And for me, the easiest way to explain it is like the real Steve was here and the indoctrinated cult Steve was here and was suppressing the real me. And the cult identity believed he was satanic and evil and needed to be suppressed. And it really wasn't until my deprogramming that I reemerged. And it turned out I had all these memories of all the abuse that was happening to me that I was unable to think about. This is probably one of the most important slides of today, and you can literally go to freedomofmind.com and download this PDF. It's what I call the influence continuum. And the key thing is understanding influence is a continuum. This is not a binary. But healthy is about respect for your true self. It's about love and compassion, conscience, creativity, humor, free will, and critical thinking. And this dissociative disorder, the false identity, they will love you if you do what they tell you to do, is often hate of the other or any ex-member's hated dogma or doctrine. Very serious, a lot of fear and guilt manipulation, but the key is dependency and obedience. And in my research over the 47 years, I read everything I could find on social psychology and persuasion and attitude change, all the brainwashing literature. And I took Lifton's model, Singer's model, Shine's model, and as I was learning about cognitive dissonance theory of Leon Festinger, who was studying a UFO cult and published a book in 1957 called When Prophecies Fail. He created this concept called cognitive dissonance. And he pretty much said we have thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and we always want them to be aligned. And when they're out of alignment, we will do things to make them more aligned. So if you get someone to sell their house and go to a mountaintop because the flying saucer is going to take you away, that's a pretty extreme behavior. And what Festinger realized is that if you can get people to do an extreme behavior, they rationalize it in order to feel good about it. So he was talking about these 3 variables: thoughts, feelings, behaviors. And for those therapists in the room, cognitive behavioral therapy is the thought and the behavior piece. But anyway, I took the three components and I was thinking, if I add information like deceptive recruitment, having people tell on each other, I created a whole nother category of information control. And when I wrote my first book, Combating Cult Mind Control in 1988, I had these 4 attributes, but it wasn't until the late 1990s that our friends said, you know, if you change the order, you can call it bite, and then people can remember it. So that now it's history, because everybody's millions of bite models all over the internet, because it really helps to flesh out behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And for this slide, I also decided I would add healthy leaders and unhealthy leaders. And unhealthy leaders are the best category I've come across was from Eric Fromm, who wrote about malignant narcissism. And that list of characteristics is also on my website for free if you want to download it. When I wrote The Cult of Trump, I was asked by my agent, all I knew is Donald Trump was a malignant narcissist and that this was the stereotypical profile of all cult leaders. So chapter 3, I compared him with Jim Jones, Sun Myung Moon from my cult, Hubbard from Scientology. And if you memorize those qualities, and I have a couple of slides, you can protect yourself from 80% of every predator or bad actor for the rest of your life. So there are these patterns of healthy and unhealthy. Healthy organizations that, you know, encourage growth, have checks and balances. They are diverse. And you're free to leave without threats or harassment or phobias. Whereas the unhealthy, destructive mind control cults, they're very elitist. I have more slides on this. Deceptive. They want to clone people in the image or the ideology, either in the image of the leader or the ideology. The ends justify the means. There's never a legitimate reason to leave. And because of time, I didn't include 20 slides to flesh out the bite model, but I can just hold up. There's a lot of criteria for each one of these. And in fact, I did my doctoral dissertation taking all of these variables and putting them on a Likert scale of never to always. And we were able to create the first scientifically validated construct to evaluate undue influence. So the more of these, the worse the group is. And the most extreme bad groups are terrorist groups, and traffickers and pimps are the most extreme. And as we're doing more research, other cults like Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons turn out to be more like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 versus a 9 or a 10 of the more extreme versions. I wanted to include these 2 slides. Again, you can go to Freedom of Mind and look under Learn, Undue Influence, and download this. These are the standard on a continuum of narcissism, the grandiose self-centered behavior, fantasies of power, success, admiration, need. Am I talking too fast, Jules, or am I doing okay? Okay, good. Trying to speed through it so we can have more interaction. Constant need for praise and admiration, sense of entitlement, lack of empathy is key. Narcissists are very good at reading people and making them feel special, but in the end, they really don't have the capacity to feel in a true empathetic way. And therefore, for those people in relationships with narcissists, they don't have the capacity to love, in my professional opinion. Now we get into the psychopathological part of malignant narcissism. People who think they're above the law, pathological lying, interpersonally exploitative, sadistic, harassing and silencing, violent, paranoid, and don't trust anybody. And not all cults are like a pyramid, but a lot of them are. And there's an apex with a top leader, often a guru, a shaman, a messiah. And I'm just going to take a minute and say in the cult of Trump, there are millions of Americans in what's called New Apostolic Reformation churches and mega churches. And these groups have a leader that claimed to be a prophet or an apostle that can speak directly to God. And they can speak in tongues and prophesy and cast out demons, etc. And it's BITE to the hilt, where people are afraid to consider any thought outside of the doctrine of this group. And that's why they keep saying Trump won the 2020 election, even though there's overwhelming evidence that Biden won. But to understand, if you're doing therapy and somebody says they were in a cult, they could be a fringe member for a few years, then move in, become a rank and file member, or maybe a devotee, or maybe a leader. Maybe they get kicked out, then they come back in. So it's important to track if you want to do good therapy. Alan Shefflin is a now deceased law professor emeritus, a friend, and I read his book, his 1978 book in 1978 about MK Ultra. It was one of two books on the CIA's mind control research. We became fast friends. He created this social influence model for expert witnesses to explain to judges and juries. And I have blogs with Shefflin, him speaking, and much more fleshed out versions to explain all of this. But just think about the influencee and their unique vulnerability, the influencer. Do they have higher status because they're a guru or a shaman or a president of the United States or something? And look at purpose and techniques and setting and the consequences. Very important. My influence continuum and bite model is central to the methods or techniques, because if you're controlling behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions, you're controlling people's identity and sense of self. For this presentation, I decided to, by the way, these slides are from my online course. I have a 9.5-hour course with CEs for mental health professionals and a version without CEs. But I wanted to include hypnosis and hypnotic processes. It's something that I've been trained in from my first exposure to neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, in 1980, where I got deeply interested and involved to the point where John Grinder asked me to be his apprentice, and I moved to Santa Cruz. Because all the stuff I learned about social psychology, there was something missing, and it was hypnotic techniques. Hypnosis isn't sleep. We're going in and out of trance states all day long. If we're doing sports, if we're doing music, if we're doing dance, we go into a zone where we're not frontal cortex analyzing things. We're in the flow of things. And so it's a natural state of mind. And I think when we're talking about psychedelics, this is substance-assisted trance phenomenon, in my opinion. And what I want to say about hypnosis is that it makes the mind more malleable. You're invoking imagination and concentration. And again, if there's an ideology, you're trying to heal someone, or you want to explore a past life, or any number of other things, people can have extraordinary experiences that are positive or negative. And I've had a number of clients that had bad people molest them using hypnotic techniques covertly. People have false memories of sexual abuse installed in their memories to alienate them from family and friends, all kinds of dangerous, destructive things. So I just put a few things in here. One thing I realized after the fact was that when I was first in the Moonies, I was told to pray to be like the older brothers, like the other leaders, and to pray to be like them. And I think it was very much like a trance identification thing. And I was eventually told to be like Sun Myung Moon, to think like him and feel like him and walk like him and talk like him. So that's what I mean by behavioral modeling. Mirroring is activating mirror neurons where you can induce a sense of knowingness with someone if you're breathing the way they're breathing, or if you're mirroring their posture, the tone of their voice, the cadence of their voice and such. It puts you at ease. It makes you feel like you've known this person your whole life, even though you just met them an hour ago. It's very much a trance phenomenon. And NLP was based on the work of Milton Erickson, who was a psychiatrist. He was part of MK Ultra, I will add. And Erickson created a conversational, naturalistic approach to hypnosis. So not the old form of hypnosis where someone was giving you direct suggestions, or you're going to look at the watch it go back and forth. Like that's Erickson was very much, you never give suggestions that the person can say no to. So you're constantly telling stories, watching the reactions, and molding how you're talking to tune into that person's sense of reality. I added hallucinations also because when you're being trained in hypnosis, a positive hallucination is where you see something or hear something or feel something that isn't there. So that's what's called positive. A negative hallucination is where there's something there that you make disappear. So it's not good or bad. It's about manifesting something. So with a hypnotic suggestion, you can, tell somebody to see their favorite childhood friend, and that childhood friend's going to tell them an important message. And if the person can see their childhood friend, they may actually get an important message. That's if a legitimate hypnotherapist is doing this, of course. If you're a sports person, I play basketball, you see the ball leaving your hand, arcing, going through the net. If you're good at positive hallucination, you can perform all kinds of interesting things. And negative hallucinations, like when I first started public speaking after I got out of the cult, I was so nervous. And I would just make everybody disappear in the audience, except my family or my friends. I would make the TV cameras disappear, just so I could be more functioning. And there was an Indian guru who claimed to be God, who would basically do sleight of hand and other magic tricks and convince people they had supernatural powers. And Lifton liked to talk about mystical manipulation, where the person believes you know everything about them, but everything is based on gathering information on you and understanding what are your weak points, or what are the things that you're most are going to move you or direct you. I'm going to finish up in a minute. How am I doing for time? I'm going to finish in a minute. I've already mentioned false memories. So this is my doctoral dissertation. It's on my website too. I explain the major Chinese communist brainwashing models. I then explain trafficking, which is against the law internationally. So my work is on how to update the law regarding undue influence. So I use trafficking as a foundation, connect the dots with brainwashing, did my quantitative study on the bite model, and this is a resource for folks. And this is just the slide telling you if you want to know more, there's a course you can purchase. And I recommend reading Combating first, which has my story in the Moonies. It first came out in '88. Freedom of Mind is how to help others who've been indoctrinated and mind controlled. And the most recent is The Cult of Trump. And if you feel like taking your phone out and take a picture of this, you can see my link tree with all of the key links. Um, and all I can say is it's your mind and only you should control it. And the way to be in control of your own mind and body is to understand yourself, understand the techniques of influence, good ones and unhealthy ones, and to constantly remind yourself if something is legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny. Always ask those questions, go to other parties to reality test things. And with that, I'm going to end, Jules.
Thank you very much, Steve. That was fantastic. So Yeva, I'm just going to talk for 5 minutes about how psychedelics can play a role in cultic dynamics, and then I'll come to you. Well, briefly, I've been interested for many years in spirituality and also the dark side of it. The question that fascinates me is these New Age and human potential movements. How do movements dedicated to human liberation sometimes end in enslavement? And one of the issues is that a guru figure tells his followers to be, or her followers, to be fully free and fully human. Surrender to me. I know you better than you know yourself. Obey me, whatever I say, and then you will be fully free and enlightened like me. So I'm also fascinated by what role psychedelics can play in cultic social dynamics. And I wrote a paper on that with Joseph Holcomb Adams, which Joe can share in the chat. That's for a book on psychedelic harm reduction. Now, there is a lot of research and debate over cults or high control groups over the last few decades. There is not actually much specifically on psychedelics and cultic manipulation, psychedelics and suggestibility and so on. But there are some papers, but there needs to be a lot more research and communication around this issue. Now, Joe and I identified at least 3 ways that psychedelics can amplify cultic social dynamics. First of all, psychedelics increase suggestibility, reverence, and transference in those taking the drugs, especially reverence and transference towards those who give you the drugs. You might think, what a special enlightened person you are. I'm so grateful to you. So you can also be, under the influence of psychedelics, very susceptible to a guru figure's cues and their framing of your experience. You're very malleable under psychedelics. Nicholas Langlitz, a great anthropologist of psychedelics, has called these drugs charismatogens because they seem to kind of invest the people working with psychedelics with charisma. He talks about going to a psychedelic science conference and seeing people kiss the feet of Albert Hofmann. That's not something you'd see in many other types of scientific conference. And think how many figures in this field are really revered as kind of saintly icons. Secondly, psychedelics can increase countertransference and ego inflation in those giving the drugs, those working with the drugs. They can very easily buy into the projection that they're receiving and think, yes, I really am very special. I really am incredibly enlightened and attractive. And I can just heal people no matter what I do, and how wonderful, I now have this total power over other people's minds. So back in the 60s, Sidney Cohen, who was a kind of pioneer in talking about the adverse effects of psychedelics, said, "The ability to induce the transcendental state is a heady and powerful endowment. Only well-adjusted therapists without personal needs to play God will be unaffected by the potency inherent in the situation. Those who have had latent notions of omniscience can become convinced of their own preeminence. Such an individual is a real threat to their clients." And in fact, his colleague, Betty Eisner, ended up running an abusive therapeutic cult in the 70s. Now, the third thing that we talk about in this paper is that psychedelics can amplify collective cultic social dynamics. What do we mean by cultic social dynamics? It's when organizations or communities have certain features. For example, they have shared mystical or trance experiences, which can lead to sudden conversions, shared rituals, beliefs, and terminology. New cultic identities that are formed, sometimes to the point of adopting new names. Your individual identity is dissolved into a strong collective identity, which can feel like a new family. High levels of obedience and loyalty to the group is sometimes demanded. High levels of identification with...
Yep, again.
Sorry, can you mute yourself, please? Or could one of my co-hosts just make sure everyone's muted? Identification with and devotion to a charismatic group leader who is seen as special, enlightened, even godlike. A strong group hierarchy with higher status based on proximity to the charismatic leader. A sense of specialness of the group, its access to secret knowledge and spiritual power, and the superiority of group members to the uninitiated and unawakened. And finally, an exalted sense of the group's utopian or cosmic mission to save the world, a mission so transcendent it deserves great levels of submission and sacrifice. Now, an organization could tick all those boxes and still be not unhealthy. It could still be a community that people love to be part of and that they feel very fulfilled being part of it. You could point to like the Grateful Dead, for example, or the Merry Pranksters. However, those kinds of cultic dynamics increases the risk of abuse and harm. Why do they do that? Because they increase conformism. They lower critical thinking. They increase the possibility of manipulation or coercive persuasion by the leaders of the groups, leading to incidents of sexual, financial, and spiritual abuse. There can be pressure to dissociate from non-members, to dedicate more and more of your time and money to the group, to follow the demands of the leader over your own life, including over your diet or your sexuality. And the leadership or group may not accept any criticism, and those who leave may be demonized or shunned. So there are some examples of high control groups who have used psychedelics as part of their kind of manipulative tactics. For example, the Manson family, Aum Shinrikyo in Japan, a psychiatric psychedelic group called The Family in Australia, Centrepoint in New Zealand, Bhagwan Rajneesh's commune in India and then Oregon. How did they use psychedelics? In various ways. First of all, to recruit people, to lure people who are interested in psychedelic experiences. And Yev is going to talk about a group like that. Secondly, to indoctrinate and convert people, to deepen their submission to the group and to the leader. Thirdly, to increase reverence for the leader, so that the leader makes themselves seem supernaturally powerful. Fourth, to switch off critical thinking and keep followers in suggestible states. Fifth, to make people vulnerable to abuse. So there are examples of cults that have given people psychedelics and then sexually abused them. And finally, also to financially extort people. Osho, for example, according to some of his closest followers, would spike potential donors with MDMA. And then when they were in his presence and suddenly filled with love, he would take advantage of that to get huge donations from them. So how can we finally protect ourselves against these kinds of cultic social dynamics? Well, we're still kind of learning that, and we can talk about it in our discussion. But I mean, one thing that organizations and communities could do is just try to be as honest as possible, to be as open as possible, to listen to your members, to listen to criticism. If people in your organization turn out to be abusive, you need to fire them. Have a good advisory board, have people who will stand up to the leadership and talk back to them. And if you're a client or an employee of a psychedelic organization and have been harmed or witnessed harm, then you need to speak up as well and not feel like you're harming the movement by doing that. And we need to support those who do speak up and not silence them or shame them. So Yeva, can I hand over to you? And maybe if you would like to talk just for 10 minutes or so about your experience with a shamanic cult.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you all for just raising this themes. It is very important right now, especially when all the movement on spirituality is very active, and a lot of people are going to shamans, and they are just thinking they will find all the good experiences, and thanks God if they do. But actually I am in shamanic path for almost 8 years. I was in Peru 3 times, and I met not really good shamans, like they're not doing professional work. But last experience which I had with Mukaranko family was really intense, and I'm so grateful for myself to be able to speak, because a lot of victims, they are just like cutting. They don't want to have any involvement, because they are afraid of also energetic forces, because like they're really frightening, and they just don't want to even speak about it or witness any kind of situations. So first of all, I want to mention that plant medicine is really sacred thing, and it's a tool. And this like can be used for manipulation, can be used for healing, and of course there is a lot of amazing, wonderful healers and shamans who are working very honestly. And not everyone not everyone is such a narcissistic person, as doctor really described perfectly all the I forgot how it's in English, but aspects of the person who is just playing God, just makes everybody believe that he is God. So I was in this movement for 2.5 years, and I was just wanting to learn shamanic knowledge about the plants, about the how to help myself. Also, I'm working as a therapist. I'm doing sessions, meditations, and for me it's very interesting just to learn more about myself, also the plant medicine and how to integrate and everything. But I noticed that later on something really strange was happening, and everything was just about this movement. I couldn't go anywhere else, for example, to another shaman, because I thought they are not professional, they are not working good, and it was manipulation. But at that time I didn't understand, and it's actually really hard to know things when you are on on psychedelics, on shamanic practices all the time, and they're not only using hypnosis and manipulation, but also visions and feelings and everything. And I remember when yes,
I was just going to ask, so this is a Peruvian shaman who runs ceremonies in Europe, And then what he seems to do in your case and in others is say to people after one ceremony, it's your path to be a shaman, come to me, you know, and in your case, it was after just one or two ceremonies that he said, follow me, give it, you know, like completely submit to this path. Is that right?
Actually, I was going to his students. I never was meeting him live, but I had contacts during the ceremonies with him, and students look like saints. And it's like, oh my God, I want to be like them. They are like on sexual diet, and they are so pure and so innocent, and it's something magnificent that just like I want to, yeah, be in this group. And after one time I met him after 2 years of being in this student circle. And yeah, after it's already been decided that I am also the one that um, is special, and to join, yes, to join this group and to learn all this tools. And he gives quite impressive tools to the students, how can we work with medicine. And it's I didn't see anywhere else in the shamanic ceremonies what they are doing, so it was really impressive. And that's why, yeah, I decided this is shamanic path I need to go, and it's very like devoted path. I need to be on special, very strict diet and so on. And it was like, yeah, I want to save the world, you know, as you said.
And
just to yeah.
I'm so sorry to kind of
Yeah.
such a long
Yes.
story, and I've interviewed you for a long time for this, but basically
Yeah.
he invited you to Peru to train as a shaman, and in one of the first ceremonies you're called out of an ayahuasca ceremony for a kind of private meeting with him, and he leads you to his house and says like you know, basically you know, how lucky you're going to get to sleep with me as part of your shamanic training, which is something he apparently
Well,
says to all his female students.
yeah, well, he doesn't speak anything. It's just like you, just like feeling. I was really on like peak of ayahuasca ceremony, and I just, yeah, he just sing Icaro to me and bring me to his house and to his bed, and I'm just like on trance and don't know what's happening. But thankfully, to my spirit guys, I just woke up. I woke up at that minute and like, what am I doing here? And I just like started to cry and like, what is this happening? I just went away to the Maloha, and I really was like really aware what is happening, and really aware I need to take my money back and just get out of here. And other girls at that night also was invited to his house, and yeah, and few of them really, yeah, had this initiation ritual with him. And one of them, Latvian girl, decided also to leave with me a couple days later.
So this group's been going for 10 years. Yeah, but let me just ask you two questions. First of all, how did this person use psychedelics particularly to manipulate people? And secondly, what kind of harm is he and his community causing?
Well, he does like really special healing for people. It seems like he already helped a lot of people, and already like very little stories about this magical healing and stuff. And some people are really just trusting a lot. And after, for example, few ceremonies, he invites person to another ceremony, and then during the ceremony he asked to go for a special treatment, and later on he even asked for, I don't know, 30,000 euros for this treatment. And I don't know how he's doing this, you know, manipulation stuff, but of course he is doing this with using people trust and vulnerability. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And what kind of harm is it causing then? So he's basically extorting people for as much money as he can get from them, tens of thousands of euros. Even, you know, sometimes he says to people, oh, I did a healing for you. You weren't there, but I did a healing for you, and that'll be 30,000 euros. and then there's kind of over a decade of abusing women as well, and kind of enslaving people, say.
Yeah, like there is shaman girls who is working with him. They don't see this as abuse. They see this as a blessing, as a gift, as a special thing, you know. And it's very hard to see the truth while you're there. It's like completely really very hard. So yeah, he asks for money, and if the person don't give the money, sometimes he cause, I don't know if he actually cause things, but people start to experience negative things in their lives and they get afraid, and yeah, they just sometimes just pay the money. And
yeah so Yeva was the first person, I think, to speak up about this Roger Bardales, Mukan Ranko. Two of your friends also published, so that took kind of guts for the three of you to publish, and others have come forward. We've interviewed people who were in this community for years and years. So thank you, Yeva, for having the courage to do that, and for
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And if I
He
may,
is coming. He is coming to Europe. I heard that he is coming to Europe. I was like, oh my God.
He's doing a
Oh my
European
God.
tour in June.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I just want to comment. Thank you for sharing. And Jules, your summary was fantastic. Or, yes to all of the non-psychedelic cult, religious, spiritual cults that I've worked with. You don't need psychedelics to, be raped and think it's a blessing by the Messiah, by God incarnate, and a lot of it is hypnosis and power of this situation. So John of God did healings, but what did he actually do anything energetically in a real way, or was it, how much of it was hypnotic suggestion and power of the environment? I really question whether someone who has that kind of abuse and lack of empathy and narcissism has any spiritual powers to heal.
You're right that psychedelics is just one weapon that coercive people and communities can use. I'd just like to come to Joe Adams quickly, who was my co-author of the paper that we wrote. And Joe's going to talk about, for just 3 minutes, about his experience with the Grateful Dead community as a kind of cultic organization. Joe? You have to unmute. There we go.
Yeah, actually wearing a Dead shirt right now. Yeah, so I mean, lots of people are familiar with the whole Grateful Dead thing. But there's lots, it can be a really wonderful, fulfilling thing for so many of us, and it is, but it can also become this thing that entirely consumes people, and there's a joke actually. How many deadheads does it take to change a light bulb? As many as you want. They just keep following it around until it burns out. And so, and at those shows, a big part of it is like there's tremendous collective effervescence generated, and people project that energy into the band, and often actually into, it was a big thing while he was still alive, Jerry Garcia. And so a bunch of heads, like there's even, the Jerry's children, they'd like be right up at the front of the stage, and the Spinners, and, people worshipped him as a messiah, a demigod, even an actual like fully divine being, we've talked about, it's all the same kinds of mechanisms, that Jules summarized and whatnot. And so I just wanted to share a quote though, because Jerry Garcia was very uncomfortable with all of this. Some people even, speculate, even his bandmates actually speculate, that his reclusiveness and, deepening heroin addiction kind of came from people putting all this on him. And so in an interview in 1992 with Tricycle Magazine, Barbara Meyer was asking him about the tremendous power that people kind of gave to him when he was up there. And she asked him, like if he, ever was, tempted by the power, and he said, oh no, it was frightening. And she asked him like, oh, and would you ever, give any messages, political, social, whatever, on stage, And so this is what he said. And she asked him if he was tempted. So he said, no. I thought if I'm going to be on stage, I'm not going to say anything to anybody or address the crowd, because it doesn't matter what you say. Sometimes just the sound of your voice might inadvertently set somebody off. The situation with psychedelics is so highly charged that you never know what's leaking in. I don't mind doing it in the music because that's where I divest myself of ego. It's egoless, something that I trust. If the band has something to protect, it's the integrity of the experience, which remains shapeless and formless. As long as it stays that way, everything's okay, So fortunately, Jerry, he did not want to step into that center of the vortex of all that power. But unfortunately, many do, and it's tremendous temptation. So
if I may say, that's fascinating for me. Thank you for sharing. And it just brings up a really important point about how people bring their own stuff and project it onto people. Like, I thought Moon was the true father of humanity, the perfect man, and I loved him. But he was a total dickhead and an asshole who didn't give a shit about me. But it was like I was projecting it, and it was being reflected back. And I just want to comment, there's a book called The Guru Papers. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it, by Joel Kramer and Diana Alstad. It's really a gem. And Joel was one of the first Western yogis that was teaching. He wrote a book called The Passionate Mind. And he became a friend of mine. And he said, people were projecting so much on me, I had to retire. I couldn't teach anymore because he felt getting sucked into this dynamic of one over. And he realized the seductiveness of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Okay, well, we've got now we've got at least 30 minutes for discussion. Steve's got a hard end in half an hour, and some of you might as well, but we can stay a bit longer, some of the rest of us, if people have comments. So any questions or comments? Yeah, we've got GV. You got to unmute yourself. There we go. Yep, should be announced. No, we can't hear you.
You have to unmute, GV. We can't hear you.
Now it's better. Sorry,
That's
I'm
fine.
on my phone. So Jules, you mentioned Albert Hoffman, and I think it's now with the Grateful Dead and Jerry Garcia and some of the conversations that we're tiptoeing around here. So I often hear the term cult leader applied to individuals and organizations who don't actually exhibit cult-like traits. So all these people that touch the feet of Albert Hoffman, is it possible for communities to behave like a cult without the leader actually being one? And then if so, how much does a leader in that position, how much responsibility does that leader have in dissuading people from that behavior? And I see this happening a lot of people in psychedelics calling other people cults when really the leader has no cult-like behavior.
Right. Steve, what do you think?
No, I think it's a version of what I just said about projection and stuff. But if someone's running a group and whenever money is involved, or requests for people to change their lives and move somewhere, I think the leader has a huge responsibility to call it out, to install checks and balances, to have naysayers, and you can tell when someone's really spiritual, in my experience, because they're not about ego. They don't want attention. It's just about being a good person. and not needing to be at the front of the room and on a chair and getting flowers and all of that. So I do think that the leader has a lot of responsibility. And then I'd like to just add, with SEO, search engine optimization, really bad groups put up 1 million websites with the keywords about cult and everything, but they're all pro that group in order to make it harder for people to find the factual stuff of what's wrong with them. So don't trust search engines, at least the first 10 or 20 or 30 responses on things. And I'm going to just add one more thing, if I may, Jules. I did a TEDx talk called "How Can I Know If I've Been Brainwashed?" And I tell a bit of my Mooney story, but I outline a 4-step reality testing strategy. I say, get away, like turn off the phone or just get away from whatever the environment or the person is. Study the bite model and Lifton and brainwashing. Seek out critics and former members and really listen to their experience. And then honestly self-reflect. Back in time, what did you think you were getting involved with? For what reason? And did you get what you wanted? And if the answer is no, I was deceived, or I'm here years later and I'm still like waiting for healing, time to leave.
Thank you. Yeah. Erica, nice to see you.
Hi, everyone. What a lovely discussion. We're having an impressive topic to tackle. I'm glad to see so many old friends and new friends here. One of the points that I wanted to bring up is this. I run an organization that's a nonprofit that supports survivors of psychedelic harm, and we're working on creating a compendium of survivor stories. And I've been noticing a really interesting common thread through the vein of survivors, which is this idea of being spiritually attacked, or having people, do black magic against you, or feeling like your abuser is coming into your dreams or talking about you or spreading rumors about you in community. And all of this is such an incredible common thread that I'm seeing in survivor stories. I think one of the points that came up to me in this discussion was the advantage that we have currently in the US in the psychedelic landscape is not a lot of facilitators are well trained in this type of like spiritual magic. When you go out of country, when you go into indigenous lineages, when you go into practitioners who have been training for their whole life within a lineage, there's more potency to this like openness to spiritual attack. And what we're finding in US based harm is there are a lot of threats around this spiritual attack, but like none of it's like, it's almost like it's not strong enough. And so it's really interesting to hear the story about the abusive ayahuasca facilitator who's charging money, and having these like people in the community are saying that they're spiritually attacking him if they're speaking out against him. And I think that this is a piece of harm that's really challenging to define in clinical research and in the medicalized setting, but it's something that is coming up so often with Shine survivors, that it's something to be aware of in community. And so I'm so glad there's so many people here learning. So thanks for that.
So if I can add, Erica, I'm enjoying this conversation and these comments so much. I have endless stories of people who've been programmed to believe their leader had these spiritual powers, including my former cult leader. and
Yeah.
Sai Baba, where people with, he's coming to me in my sleep and having sex with me and this and that. And it's so interesting as a clinician that people from, the cult leader from another cult isn't the person coming to, it's the one that you had the experience with. And all I can say is that I often have to just say, hey, if Sai Baba was God and had the powers you're ascribing, then he knows what I'm saying right now.
Mhm.
And I'm saying he's fucking asshole rapist of 500 boys, and he's doing magic tricks. Come on, kill me now.
Mhm.
And my clients in the office going, aren't you afraid? I'm like, no, not at all. And one more quick story. I was on the Oprah Winfrey show on Church Universal and Triumphant, which is the I Am movement that QAnon is so into. There were 50 cult members in the audience, and I could tell something was up because they were all staring at me. I didn't know until afterward they were doing a decree against me. Smash, blast, destroy, annihilate, consume, Steve Hassan. Smash, blast, 24/7 for a week. They were rotating members, and I'm like, I'm still here. What happened? Where's you know what I mean? You have to debunk that nonsense.
I think that's really true, but I also know with like Erica, when you're working on these stories and exposing evil predators, particularly if they're shamans as well, you think, can they curse me? Can they hex me? And I think you do need to kind of, rev up your critical rationalist and say, just like you said, fuck them.
But I also believe in spirit, and I believe in God, and I believe God is stronger than evil people, and I'm protected. So that's part of how I've lasted 47 years, Jules.
Yeah, that's true
Just
too.
like,
Yeah. If you're doing the right thing, you can't ultimately be harmed at some level.
well, I mean, I may be harmed, but it hasn't happened yet. And, but I know I'm a good person, and I don't believe that evil is stronger than good.
I think spiritual predators are sometimes bullies and they're not used to people standing up.
Sure.
Okay. Tyler, and then we've got some others. Yeah.
Hi, howdy. My name is Tyler Garrett. Thank you, Jules and Steve and everyone else for organizing this and putting it on. As a brief aside, I'll mention that I grew up Orthodox Mormon. I got out maybe 4 years ago or so, but I agree with the with the assessment that it's about a 6 or a 7 on a scale of 10. It was everyone was so nice, and people either think you're weird or of the devil, or you're a hard worker and you're good at keeping rules. And I never saw what's the big issue until a couple of years ago. Long story short,
Congratulations for leaving, by the way. I've done a lot of work with LDS and FLDS. Please continue.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It is it's an interesting organization, to say the least. To catch up to the present, I'm a lawyer out of Arizona. I advise entheogenic churches on best practices, getting set up, how to comply, and to do everything above board. This topic does come up, though, this question of internal compliance and rules and ethics and morals, and how do they as practitioners carry themselves. I think my direct question to this group and as a discussion point is there in the ecosystem a list, maybe 10 bullet points, just something that we can point to and help these people incorporate into their internal governance structures to say, here's our ethics compliance policy, here's what we will and won't do. I'm interested in helping them craft those. I can do it unaided, but the discussion that I'm hoping to have is what sorts of things should be in that. And I know there's a lot of literature, but as a discussion point.
That's great.
Well, I encourage you to look at my doctoral dissertation. And I also did a blog on coach abuse, psychologist abuse, and such, of like, what are the ethical guidelines if you're going to do coaching or therapy with anybody, and what the warning signs are and such. And I'm a real believer in that the purpose of therapy is to get out of therapy. And if you're going to do something because you want to heal, you need to have a target of what that would be like to be healed. And, and I think that it's really healthy to take time out from whatever you're doing and get other perspectives and go to naysayers or people who are critics or ex-members and really listen to what they have to say. I'm doing a talk for a man named Daniel Greenberg, who's co-founder of an organization of intentional communities around the world. I'm doing that on May 4th. And because he wants to also, like, what are better guidelines for communities, and to call out the bad actors.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there could be just some kind of clear, like, one-page document or a kind of a module or a workshop, and maybe we could try to connect, like, Erica and Shine and Alison Hoots and the Sacred Plant Alliance, and so, some of these kind of things to see what would be useful for like psychedelic churches and so on. So yeah.
Yeah, and it always has to be okay to leave if you're not happy or you have doubts. It always, and if your mom's dying of cancer and asking for you to come visit, and the leader says no, you're needed here, like, run out of that group, please.
Okay, so we've got 4 more people. Thank you very much, Tyler. Lyndon, good to see you here. Do you want to ask a question or have a comment?
Absolutely. Stephen, I'm a huge fan of your work. I know what you have done through Nexium and some other groups that you've worked with. I am curious, in the psychedelic space, there are a lot of cult dynamics at play with these leaders and everything that we've been talking about. You mentioned sort of how you got out by being separated from the group. I'm interested to hear, Leva as well, if there was and Tyler, if there was a wake-up moment. And for someone on the outside of this particular group who has loved ones inside, is it just a waiting game? Like, what is it? I know that through a lot of what work that you've done, Stephen, like letting these people know, non-judgmental, I'm here for you, you can come to me anytime. But is that all someone on the outside is capable of doing to help these people?
No, so I was deprogrammed, and to answer the first part of the question, my wake-up moment was at the end of a 5-day commitment. I had learned about Chinese communist brainwashing, and as a Moonie, they were Satan, we were God, and the 8 criteria fit. So that was a big, but it still didn't crack the egg, so to speak, of my commitment. But what did was they handed me a speech of Moon to congressmen and senators. They just handed me the speech and asked me, read this and tell us what you think. And basically I had the first negative thought in 2.5 years that Moon was a liar, because he was saying how surprised he was that any American could imagine a Korean could brainwash an American, and how much he respected Americans. And I had heard him personally put down Americans for 2.5 years. And as soon as I thought, what a liar, then I thought, if he's a liar, then he can't be a man of God, because we teach that God is a God of truth. Then I said, he can't be the Messiah, and I can't trust him. And then I started crying for 3 hours when I realized that. And the second part is, over the decades, I've developed what I call the strategic interactive approach for family, friends, or anybody to learn how to interact with people who've been indoctrinated, to get them to start thinking and reality testing. But it's not persuading someone to leave or that the leader's bad. It's not giving facts. It's asking questions in a respectful, curious manner, really listening, feeding back to them, and being able to articulate the influence continuum and bite model and such with other groups that they would agree are cults and brainwashing.
Mm.
and using them as case examples. Because you can see it in another group way before you can apply it to the one that you've been committed to. But if you can see it in Chinese communist brainwashing camps, that's a big step in the right direction.
And I suppose it's also looking for, well, maybe other source of information that they might respect as authoritative. So Yeva and her friend, well, Yeva, do you want to speak just briefly about Santa, who, when you were there in the camp in Peru, didn't Santa asked a friend of hers who was also a kind of shaman, is this normal? What he's saying, like, as sex as a kind of shamanic method, is that right, Yeva?
Yeah. They all said that it's okay if it's a healing, and everybody who is more euphoric persons, they said to us, so it was really hard to figure out by ourselves. But after this wake up moment in the morning, as I told you in the story, in the morning I talked with them again, and they persuaded me, sorry how it's in English, they made me believe that it was actually a healing. And after, I really needed time for myself with my own energy, just to figure out that it feels wrong. And I think this is just a person decision. The person needs really to wake up from inside. Others cannot influence and cannot tell you until you by your own understand that this not feels right, and I'm just don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah, thank you. Joe Adams.
Yeah, it's a question for Steve. So regarding the identity disturbance, the other specified dissociative disorder. So basically, like, with a healthy group, like where somebody gets, really, really, views involved in a healthy group, if they leave it, that might, cause some kinds of, like, or you leave your family or something, could cause some sorts of changes to, trouble with your identity. And I was just wondering if you could say a little bit about sort of what are like what's distinctive about like what causes like when people leave like destructive high control cults, like what causes the like that, like the other specified dissociative disorder, like what, and what's kind of distinctively different about that than say like an identity crisis from just leaving a healthy group or something like that.
Well, so my understanding, my model is that if you're a core devotee of a group, you have this dissociative disorder, and it's what we call ego dystonic versus ego syntonic. In other words, I can have the identity as a teacher, as a husband, as a therapist, as a basketball player, or any number of other identities that I can switch in and out of, but it's congruent with my core sense of self. A destructive identity suppresses yourself. And here's another important point. And was it Yeva? Is that your name? This is a very important point. A dissociative disorder, in a sense, implies you're not in your body. And you were talking about feeling it, and you were pointing to your body, that you just felt like there was something wrong. It's like coming back to our grounded, human self is critical. And then I didn't say this when I was presenting earlier, but the universal mind control technique is what I call phobia indoctrination. A phobia is an irrational fear versus a legitimate fear where something is actually dangerous. And just like someone who has an elevator phobia can't imagine riding safely and comfortably in an elevator, like their heart races, they have anxiety, they have a panic attack. a person with an elevator phobia can't imagine riding safely and comfortably in an elevator. And when you're in a mind control cult, you can't imagine leaving and being happy and fulfilled and spiritual. But meeting former members who are is an antidote to the phobia programming. And that was a piece in my deprogramming of meeting 3 ex-Moonies, one of whom I had recruited, that they were happy and they were out. That was another really critically important piece. And for the question that I was asked before, I have a whole chapter in my Freedom of Mind book on a 3-step phobia intervention that a person can do with someone, where they're explaining the difference between a legitimate fear and a phobia, explaining how to cure it. Step 2 is how another group puts phobias in people's minds to control them.
Yeah.
And then step 3 is how do you feel about if you ever want to leave? And for people being asked that, once they have that context, can you imagine being happy and leaving? And you kind of see smoke going through out of their ears in a metaphorical sense.
Yeah. It's interesting in the investigations we've done over the last kind of 18 months or so, people say that they do have scruples and qualms and kind of misgivings along the way. They see, they're not completely brainwashed. They have that conscience within them. It's suppressed rather than eliminated.
Exactly.
And often it's kind of ex-members who can really speak to that part of them, which is still there going, I don't know if this is right, but there's another part of them that's so invested that, like Steve says, they can't imagine walking away. What do they do afterwards? But there is always kind of a part of them which sees what's going on and sees that it's not right. So
Amen.
To John and then Rajiv.
Thank you both. It's been a really great talk. I'll try and keep it brief. I'm just fresh out of a pilgrimage with an indigenous tribe, which I won't name for the energetic consequences on a recorded Zoom. However, Jules's email about this talk kind of came during the pilgrimage and really interesting timing. And I just wondered, we've talked a lot about Western cults. We've talked a lot about the Western mind and the Western ways and how the Western consciousness might form. We talked about malignant narcissism and stuff. I just wondered, in your experience, Stephen and Jules, around where this kind of approach towards the concept of cult may apply to more sort of ancient traditional cultures that have only relatively recently been contacted and started working with the West, say, just talking from direct experience.
Yeah, all I can say is I live in the here and now, and people ask me about groups, from 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago or whatever. And I don't know, but all I can say is, this is who I am, my understanding of human rights, my understanding of the human mind. And I'm a love guy. I'm like love, not fear and hatred and disgust and putting other people down is where it's at. And going back to Joel Kramer's book, The Guru Papers, his take is we've evolved past the period of time where we needed to surrender to a master or thinking. We need to keep the power in ourselves and become our own masters to ourself. And real spirituality, in his mind, and I agree, is serving others and helping the planet.
Yeah, I would just add, John, that what I've noticed is sometimes organizations led by non-Westerners that are destructive high control organizations one of the ways they'll try to manipulate Western students and followers is by saying, this is your Western mindset, you don't understand, you just need to let go, this is your cultural imperialism, just trust me. But there is a lot of wisdom in non-Western cultures about abusive, predatory type spiritual leaders. There's a central idea, which I think is really useful for us to learn in the West, in Amazon shamanism, which is not all shamans are good. a lot of them get tempted by power and are no longer working for the good of their clients, but for their own good, and they become brujos. And that kind of sorcery is rife in shamanic culture. And someone like Roger Bardeles that Yev was talking about is just a typical example of someone who at somewhere along the way got lost and started to crave money and sex and power, to the harm of his followers and his own harm.
Yeah, power, money, and sex are the universals that I see, over all the decades of my experience. And does everyone know that Carlos Castaneda was like a fraud and a cult and not a good group?
Podcast on it. Rajiv.
Hey, hi. Thanks a lot for such a nice topic and discussion. This is really interesting. I am an entrepreneur, and I'm considering building an app which actually involves quite a lot of these aspects. Actually, it is like guided meditations driven by AI. It is helping people use psychedelics and guide them through a journey of so it's kind of like spiritual awakening, all this stuff, right? And I'm kind of I'm at a point where I'm worried that whether this thing can turn into a cult in itself, right? You could imagine that there is like a AI guru, right? Kind of an AI guru, right? Who it's not driven by a person. There's like it's just like because nowadays it can be possible, right? You can have like you can impart all those things to also AI, right? All those transference can happen to AI as well, kind of, right? Because there's already people are talking about these things are conscious and all that stuff, right? So I'm at a point where I'm worried that am I leading people to a good place or not, right? Is it like my thought is that I want to help people join this whole conscious living community or like and help people like improve their lives and all, but how do I prevent it from becoming a cult, right? So Stephen, you said all this like all this power, money, and sex, right? All those things, right? Should I like focus on those things and avoid this completely, like keep it like what do I do, kind of?
So Jeff Hinton, one of the founders of AI, and Yuval Noah Harari both have talked about their fears about AI and creating cults and cult ideologies. Disclosure, I'm leaving in 4 minutes to go to MIT to an AI conference. The worry I have is everybody's thinking about how can I build something that's going to make a lot of money? And nobody's talking about ethics and guidelines. And I'm attempting to talk about the influence continuum, the bite model, the predatory stuff, but there are no guardrails. And we need regulation. We need data privacy protections, and we really need guardrails. And we're living in an age where we've created tools for the first time that can become Tyrannosaurus rexes, to use Harari's terms, that will eat us.
Do you think that social media and the internet create kind of trance states?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, if you don't know Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin, who did the Social Dilemma documentary, they have a nonprofit, humanetech.com, and a podcast, Your Undivided Attention. They actually interviewed me a few years ago, and we explicitly talked about doom scrolling, which is something that Asa created without realizing the harm that it was going to cause. And he regrets it. And part of what they're teaching is with every new increment of new technology, there's a greater responsibility for what are we going to do to prevent it from going off the rails. And Rajiv, I appreciate your sensitivity to ask the question. That shows some integrity on your part, but I don't have, the answer, except that we really have to keep reality testing ourselves, come back to real life, not followers on the internet, but actual people that we have in our life and be in our bodies. And remember, we're on a planet that requires our attention because the fossil fuel countries and corporations are poisoning us and killing our planet.
Okay, well, are there any other, this is last kind of call for any questions or comments? I don't see anyone's hands
Looks
up.
like Glenn is waving.
Oh, Glenn? Okay, sorry, I didn't see that.
I can't figure out how to find my wave. So I really deeply appreciate this program. And Jules, I salute you for helping us. I think what we need is a consumer's report or some way of people communicating about the psychedelic movement, about problem areas. So I think you're starting that, and you're compassionate about how psychedelics can help. And I really appreciate your honest and transparent way of our self-criticism that if we don't do it, people are going to be hurt. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I think well, Steve.
Yeah, no, I'm going to need to go, but can we download the chat? Because I'd like to read people's questions and comments, but they changed Zoom and I don't know how to do it anymore. There used to be a simple way to archive the chats. But I want to thank everybody and thanks for inviting me. And it's a village, we have to really lift each other up because more minds are smarter than one mind on anything. And our mind is precious and we have to protect it. So with that, I'm going to go to my AI conference and try to learn what's happening.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yeah, I really appreciate your time.
Yep. So
we're going to stay on for like a couple of minutes more. But yeah.
Okay, so you're the host, right? If I close out, you'll be okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Yeah, bye.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you, Glenn. I think it's a good point. Is just to end on, not just scaremongering, but practical steps. I think some people could find themselves in cultic dynamics within an organization unintentionally, not wanting to, could find themselves stuck in a kind of guru role, which is a terrible role to be stuck in, having to pretend to be omniscient and perfect. How boring. So yeah, we can think about practical steps to take. I mean, there are some already. So there is a list of kind of red flags to look out for in psychedelic retreats and organizations. For example, that's available online. There are support groups for victims of psychedelic abuse, particularly Shine Collective. I think it would be great if we could encourage maybe Steve to produce some short information and documents or modules for people to use within different kinds of like psychedelic therapists, psychedelic churches and so on. Joseph and I are trying to produce papers on that as well, identifying what research could be done in this area. There's a need for more research. So yeah, let's think together about practical steps we could take to try and make ourselves, what's the word, kind of somewhat kind of high control resistant, so that we're just kind of aware of the warning signs, which can happen in any of us, really. Yeah. Okay. I would like to thank Yeva very much indeed for sharing her time with us, sharing her story, for your courage, Yeva, in speaking up about this nasty guy who we're going to be, publishing on him soon. And
thank you so much. I actually had bad dreams about him and all things, but as Steve said, I just said like, fuck you. I really don't care. I really don't care. I'm not afraid of you at all. Like I'm just laughing at you. So thank you so much for opportunity. And yeah, thank you everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Joseph Holcomb Adams as well. And Thank you to all the audience too. Everyone will get the recording, and we're going to put it online as well on YouTube. So appreciate it. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and keep in touch.
Thank you, Jules. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.